When I first met my husband's family, I thought I was stepping into a new chapter of love, unity, and acceptance. I believed, like every young bride, that marriage wasn't just about two people. It was about two families coming together, supporting each other, and walking through life as one. But what I didn't know then was how deeply words can cut when they come from someone you so desperately wanted approval from. I will never forget the day my mother-in-law looked me in the eye, after months of trying to impress her, after countless nights of crying into my pillow, and said just one word that shattered me inside: useless. That word stayed with me like a scar carved into my heart. It followed me everywhere I went. In the kitchen, when I tried to cook the dishes she loved, but always found flaws in. At family gatherings, when she introduced me to her friends with a smile, but the coldness in her tone betrayed her real feelings. And late at night, when I lay awake wondering if maybe she was right. I wasn't born into wealth. I didn't have the polished background or the flawless manners she believed a worthy daughter-in-law should have. My family lived a modest life. My father was a school teacher. My mother worked at a small tailoring shop. We weren't poor, but we weren't extraordinary either. When I married her son, Arav, I thought love would be enough. Arav, with his warm smile and gentle words, loved me with his whole heart. He always told me, "You don't need to prove yourself to anyone. You're enough, just as you are." But no matter how much he reassured me, the sharp stares and cold remarks from his mother made me feel like I was constantly failing. One morning, only a few weeks into our marriage, I overheard her speaking to Arav in the living room. She thought I was still asleep. "Son," she said firmly, "you've married a girl who will bring nothing to this family. She can't cook like your grandmother, she doesn't understand etiquette, and she certainly doesn't have the class to represent us. What will people say? You've married a useless girl." Her words hit me harder than any physical blow. My chest tightened, my ears rang, and my hands trembled. I wanted to scream, to defend myself. But instead, I locked the bedroom door and cried silently until my eyes swelled shut. That day, something inside me broke. But at the same time, something also awoke. I realized that no matter how much I tried, I might never win her approval by playing the role she wanted me to play. But maybe, just maybe, I could show her my worth in a way she would never expect. Life, however, doesn't change overnight. The weeks turned into months. The criticisms became routine. If I cooked, the food was too salty or too bland. If I wore a sari, she'd say the color didn't suit me. If I stayed quiet, she'd call me boring. If I spoke up, she'd say I was too loud. There was no winning. And slowly, I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. But Arav, he never let go of my hand. Every time I broke down, he was there. One evening, as I sat on the balcony staring at the stars, he sat beside me and whispered, "Maybe one day she'll see you the way I do. But until then, you don't have to prove anything. You just have to be you." His words warmed me, but deep down, I made a silent promise to myself. Not for my mother-in-law, not even for Arav, but for me. I was going to rise. I was going to build something that no one could take away from me. And fate, it seems, had its own way of aligning. A few months later, while scrolling through my phone late at night, I stumbled upon a small business program being advertised online. It was for women, ordinary women, who wanted to start their own ventures. The tagline read, "Turn your passion into a brand." My heart skipped. I remembered my childhood, sitting beside my mother as she worked tirelessly on her sewing machine. I remembered sketching designs for fun, helping her choose fabrics, and watching her transform plain cloth into beautiful dresses. That night, I couldn't sleep. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of excitement. I didn't know then that this tiny spark would ignite into a fire that would change my life forever. But at that moment, all I knew was this: I wasn't going to stay useless. Not anymore. The next morning, I stared at that business program ad again. My hands trembled as I hovered over the Apply Now button. Doubt whispered in my ear. What if you fail? What if your mother-in-law finds out and laughs at you? What if you prove her right? But then another voice spoke. Quieter, steadier, deep inside me. What if you succeed? I clicked the button. The program wasn't fancy. It was held in a small community center, with about a dozen other women who, like me, were hungry for change. Some wanted to open bakeries, some dreamed of salons, others planned online shops. Me? I wanted to create something with fabric, something inspired by the long hours I'd spent with my mother, watching her bring life to old cloth. The first day of class, I was nervous. I walked in wearing the simplest kurta I owned, clutching a worn notebook. My classmates smiled warmly, but inside, I felt out of place. Was I really capable of this? But as the trainer began to speak about branding, customer needs, perseverance, I felt a flicker of belonging. For the first time since my marriage, I wasn't someone's daughter-in-law or someone's wife. I was me. Every evening, after finishing household chores, I'd sneak into my small corner of the bedroom and sketch designs. Scarves, handbags, dresses. I'd experiment with leftover fabric scraps my mother gave me. Sometimes Arav would find me awake past midnight, my desk cluttered with drawings and threads. He'd kiss my forehead and whisper, "I can't wait to see the world wear what you create." But of course, life at home was far from supportive. One afternoon, my mother-in-law barged into the room while I was stitching a handbag prototype. She frowned deeply. "What is this mess?" she asked, her voice sharp. I quickly tried to hide the fabric. "It's just a little project," I said softly. "Project?" she scoffed. "You're wasting your time. Instead of learning to manage this house properly, you're playing with rags. Do you think being a wife means sitting around sewing? Useless." That word again. It stung, but this time, it didn't break me. Not completely. I looked at her, my voice trembling but firm. Maybe it looks useless now, but one day it won't. She laughed, cold, dismissive. "We'll see." Her laughter echoed in my ears that night, but instead of discouraging me, it fueled me. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, my sketches turned into real pieces. I named my tiny venture Noor, after the Urdu word for light, because I wanted my creations to bring light into people's lives, the way stitching had brought light back into mine. I started selling small pieces online. At first, just scarves and tote bags. Orders trickled in slowly, 1, then 3, then 10. Each time my phone pinged with a new order, my heart raced with joy. I still remember the first message from a customer. "This is beautiful. I can feel the love you've put into it." Tears filled my eyes. Someone out there valued me. Of course, my mother-in-law didn't know. I kept it a secret, fearing her ridicule. I packed parcels quietly, often hiding them under folded laundry so she wouldn't notice when I stepped out to ship them. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. One evening, during dinner, my mother-in-law casually mentioned she was buying a new handbag from her favorite luxury brand. She spoke about it with pride, almost as though carrying that bag gave her higher status in society. I stayed quiet, but inside, something stirred. Why not dream bigger? Why should Noor remain a small side project? That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Goal: build a brand that people will be proud to wear." I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I knew why. For the little girl who once sketched dresses with her mother. For the young bride who cried into her pillow. For every time someone called me useless. The journey was far from easy. There were days when no orders came in. Days when suppliers cheated me. Days when I wanted to quit. But every time I felt like giving up, Arav's voice echoed, "You just have to be you." And being me meant not stopping. 2 years later, something happened that changed everything. Noor got featured on a local lifestyle blog. The article praised my designs as a fresh blend of tradition and modernity. Overnight, my inbox flooded with orders. For the first time, I hired 2 women from the community to help me, then 4, then 10. The small corner of my bedroom expanded into a rented workshop. The scraps of fabric grew into bulk orders. My dream was slowly, painfully, beautifully becoming real. And all the while, my mother-in-law remained oblivious. To her, I was still the quiet, useless girl who didn't live up to her standards. But fate was preparing the perfect stage. Because very soon, she was going to see me. Not as the girl she dismissed, but as the woman she would never forget. The year my life truly began to change was the same year my marriage reached its 3rd anniversary. By then, Noor wasn't just a small brand anymore. It was gaining recognition, slowly but surely. We had an Instagram page with thousands of followers. Women from different cities were ordering our scarves and handbags. We were even approached by a boutique to display our collection. I should have been ecstatic, and I was, deep down. But at home, I still played the role of the invisible wife. At family dinners, my mother-in-law continued her subtle digs. "You know, Arav," she'd say in front of relatives, "if only your wife was a little more like Mira's daughter-in-law, so sophisticated, so elegant. She even helps her husband in business. What does ours do? Stays home all day." My cheeks would burn, but I forced a polite smile. Arav would squeeze my hand under the table, silently reminding me to hold on. She didn't know. She didn't know that while she mocked me, women across the city were proudly carrying handbags designed by me. She didn't know that while she pitied her son for marrying me, his wife was quietly building an empire. But destiny has a way of revealing truths at the right time. It happened during a family wedding. The hall glittered with gold and silk, music echoing from every corner. Guests mingled, laughter filled the air, and as usual, my mother-in-law was busy boasting about her status, her circle of friends, her taste in fashion. I was standing near the refreshment counter when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Oh my God, you're the founder of Noor, aren't you?" I turned to see 2 young women, their eyes wide with excitement. They held clutches I had designed, their hands caressing the fabric as though it was treasure. Yes, I stammered, embarrassed. They squealed. "We love your designs. Your brand is everywhere now. You're such an inspiration." Before I could respond, my mother-in-law appeared. She frowned, curious. "What's going on here?" The women looked at her, smiling. "We were just telling her how much we adore her brand. Noor is one of our favorites. She's really talented, ma'am. You must be so proud." For the first time in years, I saw my mother-in-law's confident face falter. Her eyes flickered between me and the women, disbelief painted across her features. She said nothing. Not then. She just walked away, stiff and silent. But later that night, when we returned home, she confronted me in the living room. Arav was there too. "So," she said coldly, arms crossed, "is it true? You've been running some sewing business without telling us?" Her tone dripped with contempt. But I wasn't the same trembling bride she once called useless. I stood tall. "Yes," I replied. "I've been running a business. I've been creating something meaningful. And it's not just sewing. It's a brand that employs women, supports families, and has grown far beyond what you think." Her lips curled into a sneer. "A brand? Don't exaggerate. You're just making bags and clothes like any tailor on the street." This time Arav spoke before I could. His voice was steady, filled with pride. "Mother, her brand is respected. Her work has been featured in magazines, and while you've been calling her useless, she's been building something extraordinary. You just refuse to see it." My mother-in-law's face hardened. But I noticed something. beneath the anger, there was fear. Fear that her judgments were wrong. Fear that the girl she mocked was no longer beneath her. Still, she didn't yield. Not yet. In fact, her resistance only grew stronger. She began treating me colder than before. She muttered things under her breath, often accusing me of neglecting my real duties as a wife. But the truth was, her words no longer had the power to break me. Because every time she tried to tear me down, I remembered the women who wore Noor proudly. I remembered the messages from customers saying my work gave them confidence. And I remembered that promise I once made to myself. I will not stay useless. Months passed. Noor expanded into 3 cities. We signed contracts with bigger retailers. Our Instagram following exploded. And then came the phone call that would change everything. A major international luxury brand, ironically the very one my mother-in-law worshipped, reached out. They wanted to collaborate with me. They wanted me to join as their new creative director, with the potential to take over their South Asian operations. I nearly dropped the phone when I heard it. My hands shook. My eyes welled with tears. It felt surreal. The very brand my mother-in-law had flaunted for years was now calling me. That night, I stared at the contract papers, my heart pounding. I knew this wasn't just an opportunity. This was destiny's way of saying, it's time. The weeks following that phone call felt like a dream. Meetings with the executives of the luxury brand were nerve-wracking at first. I walked into their towering glass office building, my palms sweaty, my heart pounding. The boardroom was filled with people in sleek suits, their sharp eyes scanning me from head to toe. For a moment, I felt like that same timid bride again, the girl who once hid her designs under folded laundry, afraid of ridicule. But then I remembered the years of struggle, the sleepless nights, the endless sketching, the women I had employed who now depended on Noor for their livelihood. And I lifted my chin. I spoke with passion. I shared my journey, my vision for merging traditional artistry with modern fashion. I showed them designs that were not just products, but stories, pieces of my life stitched into fabric. When I finished, the room was silent. Then slowly, one of the executives leaned forward and said, "You have what we're looking for." A month later, the deal was signed. I was appointed as the new creative director for their South Asian operations, on a path that could lead me to becoming the CEO. I remember holding that letter of appointment in my hands, trembling, tears streaming down my face. Arav hugged me so tightly I could hardly breathe. "I told you," he whispered. "You're not just enough. You're extraordinary." But telling my mother-in-law, that was another story. She had always worshipped this brand, treating their products as symbols of status and superiority. She would proudly display their handbags at family events, often polishing them carefully as though they were made of gold. And now, I was part of the very heart of it. The day I told her, she sat on the sofa with her arms folded, her eyes skeptical. "I've been offered a leadership position with Maison Ruelle," I said softly. Her head snapped up. "What?" "You know," I continued, steadying my voice, "the brand you love so much. They've chosen me to lead their South Asian division." For a long moment, she just stared at me. Then she laughed, cold, mocking. "Do you expect me to believe that? You, running something as prestigious as Maison Ruelle? Don't make a fool of yourself." I expected her disbelief. I expected her denial. But what I didn't expect was what happened a week later. The company announced my appointment publicly. My photo appeared in newspapers, magazines, and online articles. The headline read, "Local entrepreneur joins luxury giant as new creative director." Relatives began calling her, congratulating her, praising her daughter-in-law. Friends sent her the article with words like, "You must be so proud." She couldn't hide from it anymore. That evening, She sat across from me at the dinner table, her expression unreadable. For once, she didn't have a criticism ready. She didn't have a sarcastic remark. She was silent. It was the silence of someone who had built a wall of arrogance for years, only to watch it crumble in front of her. But the real moment of reckoning came a few weeks later. Maison Ruelle was hosting a grand gala to celebrate its new leadership. It was an invitation-only event, filled with celebrities, designers, business magnates, the kind of people my mother-in-law admired. I was, of course, the guest of honor. When I walked into that ballroom, dressed in a gown I had designed myself, flashbulbs erupted. People turned, eyes widening, whispering my name. That's her. That's the new creative director. And then, I saw her, my mother-in-law, standing near the back of the room, holding one of her prized handbags from the very brand I now represented. Her face was pale, her lips parted in shock. For a moment, our eyes locked. I could see it all. Disbelief, confusion, and beneath it, something she would never admit. Regret. Because the woman she once called useless was now standing at the center of the very world she had worshipped. She turned away quickly, pretending to admire the decorations, but I knew. I knew the truth had finally reached her heart, whether she admitted it or not. That night, as I stood on stage, delivering my first speech as creative director, my voice didn't shake. Years ago, I said, looking out at the glittering crowd, someone told me I was useless. But today, I stand here to tell you, no one is useless. Every person has a spark inside them. All it takes is belief, and the courage to rise when others want you to fall. The room erupted in applause. I caught a glimpse of Arav in the front row, clapping proudly, his eyes glistening. And in the corner of the room, I saw my mother-in-law lower her head. She wasn't clapping. She wasn't smiling. But she wasn't scoffing anymore either. And that silence was louder than anything she had ever said. The gala ended with praise, congratulations, and a storm of photographs. Everyone wanted to shake my hand, take a picture, or hear a word of encouragement. But when the music softened and the guests began to leave, I noticed her still standing in the corner, quiet and small. My mother-in-law, once the loudest presence in every room, suddenly looked like a stranger to herself. On the way home, she barely spoke. Arav tried to lighten the mood, talking about how proud he was, how the event had been a success. But she only nodded occasionally, her gaze fixed on the passing streetlights. That night, as I changed out of my gown, I heard a soft knock on the bedroom door. When I opened it, she stood there, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes avoiding mine. "Do you have a moment?" she asked, her voice trembling ever so slightly. I stepped aside to let her in. For a while, she didn't say anything. She just walked around the room, glancing at the sketches pinned to my board, the fabrics folded neatly on the desk, the small sewing machine that had been my first investment. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know you were capable of all this." Her voice cracked, and she sank onto the edge of the bed, her shoulders sagging. "All these years," she continued, "I judged you. I wanted you to fit into a box. The kind of daughter-in-law I thought would bring respect to this family. I never imagined you could build something on your own. And I called you useless." Her words pierced me. Not with pain this time, but with something heavier. I sat beside her quietly. "You hurt me," I said softly. "Every word, every insult. It cut deeper than you can imagine. I cried. I doubted myself. I almost gave up. But maybe I should thank you, because your disbelief pushed me to prove myself." Tears filled her eyes. "I was wrong," she admitted, her voice breaking. "So very wrong. And I don't know if you can forgive me." I looked at her. This woman who had been a storm in my life, now sitting in silence, stripped of her pride. For years, I had imagined this moment. I had thought I would feel satisfaction, triumph, maybe even revenge. But what I felt instead was release. "I forgive you," I said quietly. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." She broke down, covering her face with her hands, sobbing. It was the first time I had ever seen her cry. That night, something shifted between us. It wasn't sudden acceptance. It wasn't instant love. But it was a start. Over the next weeks, her behavior changed in small ways. She no longer mocked my cooking or compared me to other women. She began asking about my work, hesitantly at first, then with genuine curiosity. She even offered to help with household chores when she saw me swamped with deadlines. One afternoon, as I was preparing for a major brand launch, she walked into my workspace carrying a tray of tea. She set it down gently and said, "You should eat something before you tire yourself out." I looked up at her, surprised. She smiled faintly, almost shyly, and walked away. It wasn't much, but it was more than I had ever expected. Months later, the turning point came. Maison Ruelle had decided to open its first flagship store in our city, and as the creative director, I was responsible for the launch. The event was grand. Reporters, celebrities, influencers, all waiting for the unveiling. I stood backstage, nerves buzzing through me, when I felt a presence beside me. It was her. "I want to sit in the front row," she said softly. "I want people to know I'm your mother-in-law." Her words nearly brought me to tears. For so long, she had tried to hide me, dismiss me, erase me. And now she wanted to be associated with me. When I walked onto the stage and introduced the collection, I saw her clapping, not reluctantly, not out of obligation, but with pride. After the event, reporters surrounded me with questions. But one of them turned to her and asked, "How does it feel to have such a successful daughter-in-law?" She looked at me, her eyes glistening, and for the first time she answered without hesitation. "It feels," she said, her voice steady, "like God sent us a blessing we didn't recognize at first. I used to call her useless, but now she's the pride of this family." The crowd applauded. My heart swelled. In that moment, I realized something. Success isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about transforming hearts, even the hardest ones. And maybe forgiveness is the greatest victory of all. Time passed, and with it, the sharp edges of our relationship began to soften. She wasn't suddenly transformed into a doting, affectionate mother-in-law. No. Change came slowly, in small, hesitant gestures, like the way she would now wait up if I worked late, leaving a plate of food covered for me, or how she would quietly slip one of my designed scarves around her shoulders before going to a social gathering. I noticed it all, though she never said much, and perhaps that was her way of saying she was sorry. But the real test of our bond came a year later. By then, Noor had merged under the Maison Ruelle umbrella and expanded globally. I had traveled to Paris, Milan, and Dubai, representing not just a brand, but a journey. Women came up to me at events, telling me how my story gave them courage to pursue their own dreams. At home, Arav remained my biggest supporter. And slowly, to my astonishment, his mother began to change as well. But fate has a way of humbling even the proudest souls. One evening, as she returned from a shopping trip, she collapsed at the doorway. We rushed her to the hospital. The doctors diagnosed her with a heart condition that required careful treatment and long-term care. I remember sitting in that sterile hospital room, watching her pale face as she lay hooked up to machines. Her once sharp tongue was silent. Her once commanding presence reduced to fragility. And in that moment, all past grievances seemed so small. I held her hand and whispered, "You're going to be okay. We'll take care of you." Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she whispered back, "After everything I did to you, why are you still here?" I smiled sadly. Because family doesn't give up on each other. And because forgiveness isn't just words, it's actions. From that day on, I became not just her daughter-in-law, but her caretaker. I accompanied her to appointments, made sure she took her medicines, and sat by her bedside when she felt lonely. Slowly, she began to open her heart. One night, as we sat together drinking tea, she confessed, "All those years, I was afraid. Afraid that if you shined, people would forget me. Afraid that I'd lose my place in this family. So I tried to belittle you, to keep you small. But in doing so, I only made myself smaller." Her honesty startled me. For years, I had painted her as the villain in my story. But now, I saw her not as a monster, but as a woman shaped by her own fears and insecurities. We talked late into the night, for the first time, truly as equals. Weeks later, when she regained her strength, she surprised me in a way I never expected. She asked if she could visit my office. I agreed, not knowing what to expect. When she walked into the headquarters of Norex Maison Ruelle, her eyes widened. She saw the team of women working tirelessly, the walls covered in sketches and mood boards, the shelves lined with products that bore my name. She touched one of the handbags gently, her fingers tracing the stitching. "You built all this," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Yes," I said quietly, "with a lot of help, a lot of hard work, and a lot of faith." For a long time she said nothing. Then she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I'm proud of you," she said. It was the first time I had ever heard those words from her lips. I swallowed the lump in my throat and smiled. "Thank you." In that moment, all the pain, all the scars, all the years of rejection, they didn't vanish, but they transformed. They became the foundation of something new, something stronger. Our relationship was not perfect, and maybe it never would be, but it was real, and it was healing. Looking back now, I realize something powerful. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who end up teaching us the greatest lessons. My mother-in-law once called me useless, and maybe at the time I believed her. But life has a way of proving that no person is truly useless. Every struggle, every rejection, every harsh word can be turned into fuel. Fuel to rise, fuel to build, fuel to forgive. And as I stand here today, leading a brand that touches lives across the world, I carry that lesson with me. You are never useless. You are light. And one day, that light will shine so bright, even those who doubted you will have no choice but to see.